My colleague Nina Coppola is also here with me. First, we'll go over a little bit of the background for the redevelopment project and plan. And then secondly, how it ties into some of the ongoing village fiscal and strategic planning. And then thirdly, we'll go over the qualifying factors under state law. And that we'll we'll give a high-level summary of the TIF plan, which has been sent to all the members and also is available for inspection either through the village website or you could contact the village directly for that document. So if we go to the slide number 3, Angela.
Next, okay.
Yeah, the redevelopment project and plan. From a geographical standpoint, as well as economic development standpoint, the property, which includes the former Calumet Country Club, is located at the northern gateway to the village, not only to the village, but also to its downtown area and its TOD, transit-oriented development district, which has undergone some redevelopment over the years and is also the recipient of a TIF district. Over the years, and this is nationwide, not only for the village of Homewood and for the surrounding communities, there has been a decrease in attendance or usage of golf courses. This has been translated into less use and less revenues for the ownership or for other members. And in many cases, you've seen closures or underutilization of the facilities. And that is indeed the case here. I think if we go to the next slide, Angela, you'll see the overview of the area. It's about 116 acres, and it's within the village's corporate boundaries, located between the tollway, 175th Street, Dixie, and then the boundaries of the golf course on the west. If we could go then to the next slide, please. As part of economic development efforts, the village has, being basically landlocked, has utilized TIF and other development-related programs in order to address underutilized sites or properties that haven't been performing and try to bring them back to productive reuse. And that is the case as it relates to the country club and its underutilization over the years, and then its repositioning for another non-golf or non-recreational use in the future. In order to have some say in the development, aside from the entitlement process, the TIF does allow the village, in order to utilize the TIF revenues or the program, can assist in terms of molding the redevelopment closer in line with what village objectives would be, and maybe to address some of the unique qualifications or constraints associated with a very large property located at the north part of the village. If we go to the TIF Act compliance slide, Angela, next. In order to designate the TIF, and this has been the case, many of you are familiar with other village TIF districts that have been done in the past. The TIF has to conform to the village's comprehensive plan. That is in the process of being amended at this time. By the time the TIF would be designated, there would be the conformance as it relates to that document. It's only contiguous parcels and parcels within over 1.5 acres. We have that. We'll go a little bit over in a few minutes the factors that qualify the area as a TIF district pursuant to state law. And also the village will make a finding that, but for the TIF, the project as envisioned or the project as proposed would not go forward without the utilization of the TIF program. If we go to the next slide, Angela. So again, as I indicated earlier, that this does not occur, the development does not occur in a vacuum. There's the nationwide regional market factors as it relates to golf course properties. And on the positive side, you have a large tract, you have large tracts that are available for redevelopment. On the con side or negative side, these were special use properties. They did not have the infrastructure capacity or platting or any of the other infrastructure or internal requirements, such as internal roads detention facilities. They were largely open space. And in order to reuse those properties, there's a significant amount of site preparation, site development or redevelopment work that's needed in order to provide for reuse of the property. In this case also, there'll be requirements for buffers or berms that are needed in order to allow for the property transition to adjacent uses. The next slide, Angela. So the TIF is even though it says TIF plan, it's not really a plan as it relates to the comprehensive plan or any entitlements. It's really more of a financing program. This designation would go hand in hand with the village's ongoing entitlement and planning processes. The end game would be to utilize the program as well as the other planning tools available to the village in order to make the property redevelop, bring it back to productive use, and generate upon the termination of the TIF would allow for increased value to be released then to the other taxing districts. The TIF designation, if we go to the next slide, Angela, is needed to address some of the disincentives associated with the fact, I mean, the property has been a golf course since the turn of the century, previous century actually, and it was annexed within the village in 1980. At that time, it came in under special use permit. I believe it's still the case. So the idea would be to repurpose the property, reposition the property utilizing TIF, and address some of the characteristics that aligned itself with the property being just, again, a single purpose or single use. And I think, Angela, we could go over to the proposed land use maps. You could skip the next slide if that's okay. I am still not getting the screen sharing on my, but anyway. Currently, you'll see map on the left, it's golf course, open space in terms of the utilization of the property. At the south end, there are some improvements associated with the clubhouse and ancillary buildings, as well as the parking facilities. The map over to the right identifies or indicates that the property would be commercial or industrial, would be the ultimate proposed use underneath the TIF regime and the amendments to the comprehensive plan. We'll now go into what are the factors under state law and how we qualify this. And Kane McKenna worked in conjunction with the village staff, Jim Marino's office, and Angela as well, and the village attorney and their public works staff in order to identify what the factors are. There's two sub areas, again, one tax parcel, one piece of property, but the north part, the greater part of the area is qualifying as a vacant blighted area under the TIF Act, and that's primarily the golf course facilities. The south part, which is a crescent, on I think on an earlier map, there was an aerial, that crescent in the central part, south central part of the golf course, which includes the clubhouse and three other ancillary buildings, would be the improved portion. And that portion qualifies under different factors under the TIF law as a conservation area. And again, as we go to the next slide, the factors are separate. I want to identify that. And again, the finding of blight is conditioned upon finding the factors. A part of this, again, is the language of the TIF Act. It says if you have 2 out of these 6 factors, that constitutes a blighted finding. If you have 3 factors out of the 13, your conservation area factors. So again, the term blight or conservation really relates to how the municipality, in this case, allocates the factors to each one of those findings. And I think, Angela, if you could go to the next slide about the qualifying factors. There's 6 factors for vacant, what's called blighted vacant. You need to be 2 present out of the 6. We identified 3. There's obsolete platting. And again, this has to do with how the property was platted for the past use, and that will change going into the future. Diversity of ownership, tax delinquencies in this case had to do with a tax sale within the last 5 years. And again, these are factors that are set forth in the TIF law. You either meet them or you don't meet them. And adjacent to deterioration. And this was primarily at the south part of the area adjacent to the improved. Any environmental mitigation requirements that wasn't present, and then lag or decline in equalized assessed valuation. And as we segregated out the vacant from the improved, that was not found for the vacant areas. So there were 3 out of these 6. And again, the next couple slides give some of the background how we made those findings. Angela, if you go to the obsolete platting slide, again, this had one specific use, and it's had one specific use for a very long time. Redevelopment for alternate uses, including industrial or commercial, will require replatting for not only different lots associated with types of properties, but also internal roadways, stormwater detention, other infrastructure requirements, access and egress. Again, very much different as it relates to what was there before. The next slide talks a little bit about tax delinquencies. And again, this is kind of a box that you check, that the Act states that the tax and special assessment delinquencies, if they existed or the property had been the subject of a tax sale within the last 5 years, this factor is present. And we found that was present based on review of information from the Cook County Treasurer's Office. And that was within the last 5 years. In fact, the property subject to pay taxes being paid over recently had been, there had been 4 or 5 years of tax delinquencies associated with the property, and they had just recently been remediated. And last but not least, the next factor, Angela, is adjacent to deterioration. And in this case, again, the Act talks about portions of the property, in this case, the portion of the property that's vacant to the north and its relationship to the property on the south, in this case, improved property. And many of the improvements were found to be deteriorated. And that primarily had to do with building components as well as condition of the parking lot and drives. So that sets the table for the north in terms of the findings that were there to support the designation. Again, the TIF designation as blighted pursuant to definitions in the Act. As we move to the south, and again, this is that crescent of property in the center, 50% of those buildings were found to be 35 years old or greater, 2 out of the 4 buildings. That is the threshold factor for conservation area. And that means you need 3 out of the 13 factors, which you'll see in the next slide. We identified 5 factors that were present: obsolescence, deterioration, inadequate utilities, lack of community planning, and lag or stagnant or declining equalized assessed valuation. And Angela, if you go to the slide on obsolescence, what the TIF Act does is it gives us some basis for how you would qualify as obsolescence. And the key is, again, pursuant to the Act, that you have a condition of falling into disuse or a structure becoming ill-suited for its original use. In this case, especially over the last several years, the property had been, as evidenced by some of the issues associated with payment of its taxes and loss in usage or membership, usage, I should say. It was falling into disuse. The existing buildings most likely are not going to be reused. Either demolition is part of it. The property will no longer serve as a golf course. So those, from a functional and economic basis, be obsolete. The second factor going on, Angela, would be deterioration. And this was based on site surveys, which looked at this area last year and was updated this year. It had to do primarily with the review of the surface improvements. Again, the Act gives some guidance. If there's cracked pavement, alligator cracking, that was found to be present throughout the parking area as well as some of the internal drives. We also found that the Act allows also for identification of deterioration as it relates to improvements. And in this case, there was fascia damage around some of the golf barn in particular, but also there's some damage at the porte cochere and some of the other areas that were found both in the front and the rear of the clubhouse building. The third factor, which we identified, was inadequate utilities, and this in part with consultation with the village's public works department. Again, because of the prior use, both the utilization for increased water main capacity for different uses for redevelopment activities, the requirement for storm sewer, and also upgrade in terms of sanitary sewer would be found to be required pursuant to any redevelopment requirements. And again, if you flip that back to the TIF Act, it's if it is currently inadequate or inadequate for redevelopment purposes. The fourth factor, Angela, if you go over to the next slide, lack of community planning. And again, this has to do with the entree of the property into the village into 1980. It's been operating as a golf course primarily for the special use permit, and any different or let's say reuse of the property would have to require changes to both the village's comprehensive plan and any entitlement reviews as well. So from the standpoint of it was developed again at the turn of the prior century, and when it was brought into the village, it really was brought in independent of any community plan at that time. It was brought in wholesale, so to speak. So we find a lack of community planning based on that. The last factor is it has to do with the equalized assessed valuation. And I want to point out this number is different from the area as a whole. This number, the county breaks out valuations for both land and also for improvements. This is only for the improvements portion, the south portion of the TIF district. And for 3 out of 5 years, one of the criteria under the TIF Act is, are you below the CPI for the area? And we found that was the case for 3 out of the 5 years in which the data was present, the certified valuation from Cook County. So that gets us, we take a short stop here. That's the basis for qualification. There's 2 components, the north part and the south. Both meet the requirements under the TIF Act. There are different requirements. Again, for the blighted vacant or vacant area, it's 2 out of 6. We identified 3 factors. For the south or the improved area, which is primarily the clubhouse and ancillary buildings, that you need 3 out of 13 factors, and 5 were identified there. If we can go forward then to finish this up, Angela, go to the key elements of the TIF plan. This is pursuant to the statute. As I said, this is different from, let's say, a comp plan or area plan, which focuses more on requirements related to things like setbacks, bulk regulations, access egress. The TIF plan, under state law, you have to identify certain things to be part of the plan. We've identified, as we pointed out earlier, the boundaries. There has to be a fixed boundary, which is identified in the plan, both the legal description and a map. And here you'll see that we also have to identify the proposed land uses. Here it'd be industrial. The TIF budget, and this is a 23-year budget. It's sized to accommodate redevelopment or be part of redevelopment over those 23 years. So in this case, it's 60 million. Of course, it's dependent on what the increment is that's being generated. To the extent increment is generated and there's eligible costs, it may be utilized for the costs in the budget. But again, it's a topside number for 23 years, and it's dependent on actual generation of the increment, which gets us to the next 2 points on that slide. The base EAV, the 2019 EAV, is certified by the county. It's estimated at this time $1,382,260. Ultimately, that would be certified by Cook County Clerk's Office when ordinances are filed, but that's what's on the books now. The projected EAV, and again, this would be dependent on numerous factors, including the marketplace, how much square footage is ultimately developed there and over what period of time, but utilizing some of the development parameters associated with the reuse, we estimate 35 to 45 million, which is a significant increase over what would be there now. But again, this is based on market factors. The next slide indicates the budget. A good part of this, as you could see, almost half or a little more than half is the site preparation, which would be associated with preparing the area for different uses, in this case, industrial excavation, site, grading, the infrastructure that goes throughout the area as well as that feeds into the area. These are the primary components. As you could see here, there is no residential that was mentioned in the land uses, so there's no amounts identified for either library or park district, because no residential is planned for this area. It's primarily going to be commercial / industrial. And if we go to the last slide, Angela, we're about in the middle of the process. As I think village attorney indicated, the public hearing would be March 23rd. No action would be taken at that hearing. It is primarily to get public input. The village to date with Kane McKenna has sent notices out to all the taxing districts in the state of Illinois with respect not only to this meeting, but also to the public, identifying the public hearing date and time. There will be a general newspaper notice, two editions of the local press, which would identify the date and time for the meeting, for the public hearing. And we've also sent notices out to all the, pursuant to the TIF Act, all residential addresses within 750 feet of these boundaries. So, Jim, that would conclude our presentation at this time. We'd be glad to try to answer any questions.